Hello, beautiful community. Welcome to the Overcoming Overwhelm, a nervous system approach to wellness, health, and success. Today, I'm joined by beautiful Jenn, and I can't wait to dive into this interview with her and really, get into how important and foundational the nervous system is to everything that we want to create or the challenges that we want to overcome in our lives. So let me tell you a little bit about Jenn. She is a biodynamic craniosacral therapist with a background in somatic self-healing practices, primordial sound and movement exploration, and a lifelong continuum student. She is eternally dedicated to learning and teaching embodiment practices that honor our innate primordial intelligence. She's also an anti-capitalist hippie who gives zero fucks about luxury this and shiny objects, sustainable living, co-creative, generative community, and living in alignment with her deepest values in all aspects of her life. Body, business, relationships are what really get her excited. She's here to melt toxic cultural paradigms and reclaim sacred feminine sovereignty. So if that doesn't, resonate, if that doesn't, get some beautiful bells ringing and whistles blowing, I don't know what would. And there's so much that I want to dive into and ask you about, because I feel like so many of these modalities that you are skilled in and can help bring to people are so powerful. There are a lot of the same things that I've used and found to be so helpful, not only for myself, but for all the people that I serve and as they're overcoming their challenges with emotional eating. So for those people who are kind of wondering what this nervous system regulation, that we're hearing so much about these days, what really is it in your world? What is nervous system regulation?
That's a great question. And thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. What a pleasure to speak with you. So I like to kind of use different analogies because there's a lot more information these days about the nervous system. And because of that as well, I think there's a lot of also misunderstandings. So basically, what even is our nervous system, right? And a lot of us think about our brain and our mind, but really, if you think about our whole bodies are our nervous system. So our whole system, our toes, our nose, everything is constantly taking in information and figuring out what to do with that information. And depending on what's happening internally, doing something with that information, right? So essentially, it's actually quite simple. It's a communication system internally based on what's happening externally. And so there's a lot of language around, like sympathetic and parasympathetic and all these different things and what that means. But really simply, we have different states of beingness in our body, right? So I kind of like to think about it as different colors, right? So, when we have a healthy, regulated nervous system, it means that we have access to the full range and spectrum of all of the colors, right? So we have range in terms of action, right? So a lot of people think sympathetic, fight, flight, and this is a very common thing that people think about. But sympathetic really just means the part of us that needs to take action and activate it. So that can be going for a run, that could be, going for a workout, that can be having a fear response to something. It can be so many different things, right? But really, it's just our body needs to be in motion. And then we have our parasympathetic, which most of us kind of tend to a lot of people idealize this because it's like the state of like rest, right? And so I think a lot of us in our culture feel like, okay, we are, quote unquote, air quotes here, stressed. And so we need to be more in this like happy parasympathetic place, but we need both, right? So we need to be able to move in and out through the range of deep rest, sleep. There's different layers, right? And so if you think about it as painting and being able to express through all of these different colors, in a healthy nervous system, we can actually move through the range, right? So we can actually move through being in action and being able to move back into a quiet calm, and then come from a deep, deep rest back into kind of more of like an awake, calm mode. So all of these modes are really important. And what I find is with a lot of just programming that we experience through living our lives through lots of different experiences, some of them might be trauma experiences, some of them might be the habits that were instilled with us with our parents of, how to sit at the table, and all of these little tiny bits of beingness that kind of get implanted onto how we think we should be in the world can actually restrict us in where we sit in the range. And so we become more and more limited. So maybe we're only comfortable with maybe 2 colors in the range of our nervous system. And then what happens is we get used to those 2 colors and we kind of get stuck there, kind of frozen there. Yeah. And what happens is when we don't have access to our full range, it's a cascade effect, because all of our natural, organic, healthy processes that happen in the body then get impacted. So hormonal responses, digestion, like all of these different elements that a lot of us are trying to remedy and fix, and are actually really rooted in the fact that our body is nature, right? We're designed perfectly. We're designed in this incredible, intelligent way. And so really a lot of our work is actually, if we can kind of come back to that original range, we're actually able to self-heal and self-resolve a lot of the, quote unquote, problems and issues that we can really come up against. So hopefully that makes sense.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that description. I love that you touched on a lot of what I consider to be really important things, and I also appreciate, you said maybe some misinformation out there right now, because I think what happens is we've learned so much in the last 30 years, in the last 20 years about our nervous systems and its function and the way that it does impact our health and our sense of well-being, etc. And I think that it's easy to kind of get that very cursory knowledge and say, oh, my nervous system, I need to be more calm, right? And experience like a very, I guess, dumbed down education on our nervous system. And, I've seen a lot of things like reset your nervous system in 10 days, or, these kinds of shortcuts, because we live in a society that is so used to now having things quick and easy, and that's not necessarily to, pass judgment on that. I mean, do I love it when the eyeliner I ordered from Amazon is here overnight? I wake up and like, I just ordered this at 10 o'clock last night. And this is incredible. Like, okay, yeah, that can be appreciated. But when it comes to things like our nervous system, there isn't the overnight prime option. And I think that sometimes when we want to take that route, it ends up not being fruitful and can actually be more harmful to us. And so taking the time to really understand the nervous system, you don't have to become an expert, but maybe in some regard, you need to be an expert of your nervous system and the way that it responds in life, and those places, as you're saying. How do I know when I'm kind of stuck and I'm not experiencing all of the colors? What does that look like? What do you see in your practice? How do you know when someone comes in and is wanting to work with you? How do you know that they are in that space of, not necessarily having the regulated system where they're experiencing all the colors?
That is a really good question. And it's actually really simple. So often what we do is we live, and we know this, like we kind of know this consciously. We know this, we live in our minds and not in our bodies, right? We have this awareness of this, right? But what we don't always have is the relationship with our body to actually be in awareness in the moment, right? And so a lot of the work that I do isn't like fixing a problem, because like I mentioned, we're designed perfectly, right? So often the quote unquote problem, air quotes here,
Right.
it's actually how we are thinking and what our beliefs are and what our approach is to our body. And often we have like these ideas and stories about, okay, I have this experience and this is what it means.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work I do is listening to, you know, when I first talk to someone, for example, and I haven't worked with them before, I'm listening for two things. I'm listening to what they're saying to me, what they're speaking to me with their words and their ideas and their mind. And then I'm also listening to what's their body saying.
Yeah.
Right. Because the thing is that our body has the language of animal being, right? We can kind of think of, we have these two elements to ourselves, which is our natural animal organic body. And then we have our mind, right? And our mind tends to live in the future and in the past, and our body actually lives in the present moment. So our body's actually showing in real time. You cannot, like, our body language, it cannot lie, right? So I'm listening for, what are you telling me with your mind, and what are your beliefs, and what is your body actually saying to me right now?
Yeah.
And how much are those two things actually in alignment? And so a lot of the work that I do is actually just helping people to come into awareness and relationship to what's happening in their bodies in present time.
Yeah.
And it's very simple, but the interesting thing that happens in just being able to, like, a lot of the work that I do is helping people to unpack and let their curiosity kind of lead the way. And so a lot of the kind of training, you know, I guess, quote unquote, in the work isn't necessarily like fixing problems in the body, but it's actually kind of starting to allow for space to start to look at these different expressions through the body and their expressions, right? So even when we have something like tension or different things that we don't like, we often will pathologize these things, right? So even with the frozen nervous system thing, right? It's like, okay, I'm frozen in, let's say, this really anxious state all the time. Well, rather than looking at as a pathology, something that's a problem that needs to be fixed, again, by looking at, okay, well, this is an expression that's happening, and it's happening from a body that is nature, that is really intelligent. So what, maybe there's an actual reason behind why that's happening. And it's not necessarily even discovering what the root cause is or what the root reason is. But one of the big paths that I work with is sensory awareness. And so because our senses, our physical touch is one of the most powerful ways for us to bring our mind into the present body physical experience in real time. And so what that allows us to do is actually really start to listen and understand, what is the language of the body? Well, the language of the body is sensory information. That's the language that our body speaks. That's what animal body speaks. And so the more we can start to actually be with our sensory awareness without making some story about it, without judging it, without these kind of automatic assumptions, you know, massage therapists will always talk about this because their client will always have like, my, you know, will identify with like my shoulder, you know, pain or my like knot, you know, and it's like, we have this like relationship with this, you know, knot in our system that's always there. But when we can actually start to like explore, we're like, well, what is that actually? And we actually shift our paradigm of how we're relating to our body. We can start to kind of come into, well, what if this is actually just information? What if this is just sensorial information? And if I can look at it that way, if I can feel into it that way. And so there's these different avenues that we can start to begin to relate to our body, not as a problem, but as this actually really curious, beautiful, intelligent process and expression. And we can start to see these things as expressions rather than like permanent problems. And it can actually start to unravel even things that we've been working with or being with in our body for a really long time. So it gives us the opportunity to actually embody in a different way. We actually can feel our inner sense of like what our body feels like through a different perspective, through a different paradigm, through a different lens in that present moment. And that's what actually allows things to start to automatically shift. And it's because it's listening, right? It's like, I think about a child having a tantrum. Well, why is that kid having a tantrum?
Right. Yeah.
There's something that they want to say and express that they don't actually know any other way to express. So they're going to yell and scream and have the tantrum to get the attention, right? And so sometimes extreme sensation in our body can be like that. It's like our body being like, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. And when we keep relating to that child having a tantrum in the same way, if we keep on just trying to shut it down, or this is not appropriate, this is not the right time, this is not the right time, this is not the right time, we don't actually get to hear the thing that's underneath the thing that we're seeing and feeling and experiencing, right? Because there's usually something underneath that. And it can sometimes often be surprising. Go, oh,
for sure. Yeah.
That was that. And that allows us to actually feel listened to. So it allows our animal body to actually feel like, oh, I can, I can be seen. I can actually say this thing, or maybe even be seen in like, maybe I don't want to say this thing. Maybe I just want to be acknowledged in a different kind of way.
Right.
I want to be related to in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
So it's about our relationship with ourselves.
It really is. Yeah. You said so many things that just, brought up incredibly, I think, important the aspects of this work. And, one of them is imagine, first of all, yes, what you just said about when we open up and are willing to see the internal experience and to be witness to it, that is how we create a life of safety and security for ourselves. When we are, pay attention to what's happening. And so many of us have put that sense of safety in something outside of ourselves, our bank account, our relationships with, partners, our success, our looks, our fill in the blank, right? That's where my sense of safety lies. But when you reclaim that and you say, my sense of safety comes from within me, your whole life changes, right? You get to be in charge of that. So that is so beautiful. And, as you were talking, I was thinking about what a difference it would be to model like our healthcare and the way that we take care of our bodies from the perspective of, what's actually going on, instead of pathologizing and running straight to, oh my gosh, this person has X. How do we fix X? What drug can we give them to fix X, right? But if instead of doing that, we were looking at, what caused X from the standpoint of what's going on in the body? What are the messages that we're receiving from the body to help us see what's actually causing the tantrum, what's causing the, the experience that the person is having. I was listening to an interview last week from the Biology of Trauma Summit, and it was Ari Whitten, and he was saying, if the way we go about healthcare and the way we treat people for things is they come in, oh, you have high blood pressure, here's your pill. Oh, you have depression, here's your pill. You have your serotonin is off, whatever, here's your pill. And, we don't look at that in other areas of nature. Like, for example, we are meant to be a thriving, healthy body. And so we don't go out into nature and see something and immediately think, oh, the problem is, what we're seeing. We're like, where is that problem coming from? He said, if you go to a lake and all of a sudden, all of the fish are floating at the top and their insides are coming out and all of these things, we're not going to say, oh, I wonder what that fish needed. I wondered what, medication or whatever. We're going to say, what's going on in the environment? What's happening underneath that's causing this? Because our natural state is wellness and health. And when we deviate from that, we can look to the body for the answers if we're open and curious, as you're saying, which is so important.
Yeah.
I wonder, so many people, in the work that I do with people who are struggling with emotional eating, a lot of our behavior with food is just an attempt to avoid feeling what's happening in the body, because it is so intense and so uncomfortable. And so much of the work is learning how to be re-embodied, but in a way that feels safe, because it's, you can't just jump in there and force yourself to feel something that your brain is telling you is a huge threat. So I'm curious how you approach that when people are, maybe their body's not been a safe place. Maybe they, had work a lot with people with childhood experiences where we learned to shut down the body because what was happening was just too much. We didn't have the skills to deal with it. So how do you open up someone safely back to a place that has traditionally been felt very threatening?
That's a really good question. And I'm really glad you talk about safety, because at so many core levels, like the things that we want, whatever that is, even the relationship, the business, like we talk so much in this space of personal development in particular about pushing your comfort zone and living outside of your comfort zone and all those things.
Yeah.
I just want to put this on the record that there is no development without a core sense of internal safety. Like it's just not how we're designed.
Yeah.
And as a animal body, our animal being needs to have an internal and integral sense of internal safety before it's willing to explore. And I just want to kind of give this analogy, because it's kind of like when we are babies or children, if we have this like quote unquote, ideal, family unit, let's say, and we have this sense of, because that's a lot of where our nervous system learned what safety is and isn't. This is kind of, a development of where a lot of these ideas of what being safe in our bodies comes from.
Yeah.
It comes from the womb, it comes from our parents, it comes from our cultural development and all these internal and external factors, right? And so as we're developing, let's take this like ideal environment, the child who has this sense of safety and home in their parental unit is the child who is also really curious and exploring and climbing trees. And the reason why we're able to explore and be in this space of curiosity and open awareness and attention is because we have this integral sense of safety that when we're children is our parents, right? And so for whatever reason or not, a lot of us did not experience this, quote unquote, ideal, fantasy reality, which is actually, it doesn't mean we're broken, but however, it does mean that if we are expecting our system to go beyond when we actually don't have a solid foundation, it's not really fair. And so I think there's sometimes a lot of guilt and shame where people feel like they should be in a different place in their life, but they can't figure out why they get stuck in these things. And it's like, you know what, like it's your body is protecting you, like, let's remember that your body is an intelligent animal being. And we don't have to actually overcome these things. There are ways that we can actually, and embodiment is a huge piece of, actually being able to come into our system and re-embody, whether energy, soul, however you want to look at it. But really, I think of it as like actually taking up space inside your cellular experience, inside your whole body's expression, so that you can be in harmony with what your spirit's wanting, but also not trying to overcome your body's natural expression. And so a lot of the work that I do with like nervous system regulation is really the very first thing that I do with everyone. And I mean, I'm talking about people that do body work, right? Like I work a lot with people who are pretty embodied, like massage therapists and people who are very like physically in their bodies. And it doesn't necessarily mean we actually feel safe in our bodies. And so a lot of the work that I do on the fundamental level is embodiment work through relearning how to be in relationship with our bodies, with our sensorial experience in these very kind of soft and subtle and gentle ways. And it allows us to actually access the safety that I'm talking about is actually a level of safety that we actually understand from a deeper, this is what I talk about, primordial, non-verbal place. Because if you think about it simply, you grew your body. Like there is an intelligent force that is you, that shaped your heart, that formed your lungs, that created this whole intelligent organism that is your physical body, right? You didn't have to think it into being. You didn't have to, you didn't have to put your intention. You didn't have to, it manifested by itself. Through you, through your own internal intelligence, right? And I like to call that like our primordial intelligence or biointelligence. And so in coming back into communion and relationship to that, I mean, the modality that I often use is like with biodynamics, with sound, and also with different kind of like sensorial practices that I lead my clients through that kind of orients their relationship to themselves. And the thing is that this thing, it's already there. Like it's not something that comes from the outside. It's actually who you are. And what it does is it just allows us to actually come back into relationship with that part of ourselves. And that's where a lot of our internal sense of safety really lives and comes from. And once we can be in relationship to that, often our patterns and these things start to kind of self-right and self-resolve. And it's really beautiful because we all have a bit of a different path to get there. We've all had different experiences, traumas, all these things, right? So we might have a similar kind of similar harmonics or similar themes, right? But the way that we got there was a little bit different. And then we can actually start working with ourselves through this core sense of safety in actually starting to unwind some of our patterns and unpack some of these things. And sometimes, well, not just sometimes, often, very often, some of the things that we think that we understand about ourselves are actually completely not what we believe. And so a lot of the things that we're the most afraid of or most feel guarded around or blocked around, when we actually start looking from this more curious approach, from a more fundamental primordial approach, it's like, oh, that's actually not as scary and, awful as maybe, it's like a different, it's a way to be able to hold ourselves and actually being held by something greater so that we can approach these sometimes often really confronting elements in a much more supported way. And that allows us to be able to then have some choice, right? And options. Absolutely. And understand, right? Even now, like it's okay to be in fight or flight. It's okay, right? One of the problems is that we actually aren't aware. I used to have, for example, panic attacks. I didn't know it was happening. And so because of that, I was like trying to shut it down. I was doing all these things because I was terrified it was happening. Now, with a different relationship with myself, having done this work for so many years, whenever I feel, I haven't had a panic attack for a long time, but if I ever have that kind of sense of like fight or flight or response that needs to move through my body, I know what's happening and I can let my body go through this very natural and normal process, which is intelligent, and let it go through its whole thing. And then it's like 5-10 minutes and I can rest, have some water and feel okay. And I know that it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me. It doesn't mean that I'm broken. It doesn't mean I need fixing. It just means there's something that triggered a very deep, visceral safety response in my system, and my system responded appropriately. And if, for example, that happened in maybe an argument with my partner, or if that happened with a conversation with someone or a conversation with my boss about my work, then I can kind of go later on into kind of some self-reflection and go, okay, well, why did that happen in that situation? Like, what was it about that triggered this deep, I know it's a deep safety response. So, it can actually give us a mirror and a window into what's actually happening here on a deeper level in this conversation. And we can actually see the thing for what it is and actually take responsibility too. Right. In our part in it, right?
And being empowered to be able to navigate life from that way. It's about, right now, when we're so busy trying not to feel and experience what our internal world is sharing with us, right? We're like, oh, that's bad. Get away from me. I'm just going to go distract myself. I'm just going to go eat some sugar. I'm just going to go shop online. I'm just going to go, do any one of these distraction techniques. We're essentially just abandoning that part of us that is feeling whatever it is that's feeling. And that creates more a feeling of unsafety. It creates, we never get to the underlying issue. Like you're saying, I can go back and I can reflect and I can look at, was that based on a belief system that's no longer serving me? Was that based on, something else? I can look at it, but by running away and not being embodied, not being willing to stand in those moments, really prevents us from doing life from this higher place that's so much easier, right? We think, it's so awful. It's such a big task to stand in that space and actually be responsible for and take charge of my experience. It's easier to run away. But in the long run, it's so much easier to take responsibility and to be with yourself, because then you're not running into the same patterns over and over and over again, right? You're showing up for yourselves. So I love that you're helping us understand, what that really looks like and what's possible.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, like with patterns, often what happens is we have limited choice. And so the thing that actually opens up for us in having an integrated sense of safety is choice, right? We that's the thing we want. We want to not have to default to the safety pattern but the thing is that animal being will always, we will never override that. Right. Because it's actually,
and that's a good thing
that's keeping us alive.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we want to have access to choice, that gives us the other options, that gives us that wider perspective, literally, it is that, right? It is options. So that's the thing that when we, part of it is just, it's in being safe in our bodies, we are more comfortable with discomfort. We're okay with not being okay.
That's right.
That in itself opens us up to having more choices, more options. And also, ironically, being okay with not being okay actually helps us to feel more okay.
Right? Absolutely, kind of right?
Want, right?
It gives us confidence, because no matter what goes on, I can go out, I can take chances, I can do these things because I know I can handle the resultant feelings and whatever comes up from it. So it is such an empowering place. Oh my gosh. I could go on and on all day. I don't want to let you go, but I also want to respect the space and the time. And I want to ask you, a lot of the guests on the show are offering either free gifts or ways that people can get some more resources to help them as they start to tune in more. So I'm wondering how they can find you and what you might have available for them to just explore this a little further.
Awesome. Thank you for asking. Right now, actually, I believe I offer a couple intro sessions that are just basically like a free one-on-one session. It's 45 minutes, and we just kind of get to explore to see if working with me is right for you. I mean, really, because this work is so much about safety and about synergy, for me, I love to just have a video conversation and get to know the person and get to know what's going on. So I offer a free intro session. And if that is, basically you get to try it out and see whether this is actually something that's for you or not. And I also do different free offerings. And I think that actually this space will still be open for people. I have a container that started in July, but I will be closing it in November. And it's a free private Facebook group, Exploring Through Somatics, Desire, for 40 days and 40 nights. So it's self-led, but it's also, there's some group support, and it's totally free. It's if you want to kind of play with this idea of actually working with the primal intelligence that I like to name Eros. So if you would like to play with that, that's another space. So you can find that through me on Facebook. I think you have my name. It's Jenn Plotnikoff, and I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Movedfromwithin.com is my
Moved from within, all one word.com.
From
yes.
within.
You guys, seriously, check this out, because this is the foundation of everything else that you want to create, is this becoming embodied, and having this nervous system regulation is the key to overcoming challenges in old patterns, and stepping into, right, the name of the show, the health and the wellness and the success. So Jenn, thank you so much. It was really, really great to spend time with you, and I look forward to more encounters and learning more, and just being a part of your world.
Oh, thank you. It's really my pleasure. And thank you so much for the beautiful conversation. It's so good to meet you.
All right. Thank you. And thank you guys for watching. And I look forward to being with you on another interview in our series.